Welcome to the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast, where you will learn how to identify, evaluate, negotiate, perform due diligence on, finance, turn around, and operate mobile home parks. And now, here is your host, the fifth largest mobile home park owner in the United States, Frank Rolfe.
COVID is over, and what did mobile home park owners learn from it? This is Frank Rolfe, the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. On the front end, let me say I am not a scientist, I am not a doctor, I'm not a politician, and frankly, for the sake of our podcast, I don't really care what the origins, causes, science, anything behind COVID. I want to look at it just very specifically as far as the impact on the industry that I'm involved in, which is the mobile home park business. What did we all learn from it as park owners? Well, the first thing we learned is the current government does not respect the rights of landlords, not at all. What do I mean by that? Well, they singled us out. Of all the businesses in America, we were the ones who were told to provide services without compensation. Not utility companies, not grocery stores, not even universities. Only us. So, unlike the grocery store where you couldn't go in and fill up your basket and just walk out, although some people do, instead, in our business, we were told, we were required to provide housing, even though we weren't required to get paid for it, and then we couldn't evict people who didn't pay. Now, they did this through using a bunch of unconventional tools, which later turned out to be unconstitutional, which were called the CDC order. And under the CDC order, basically, we could not file evictions if people signed this form under the penalties of perjury, of which no one ever even noticed or knew what perjury meant. So everyone signed the form, basically stating, I can't pay you rent because of COVID. And when we pointed out to people the fact the person had totally lied and had their regular job and nothing had changed, we were told to go stuff it because that wasn't right. We are evil landlords and therefore we should just shut up and not worry about it. And even when the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do this anymore, the Biden administration did it anyway and basically acknowledged, we're not supposed to do it legally, but hey, it might buy some more time. Plus, who knows, you might get lucky. Effectively, any confidence that any landlord has in the United States government at this point has been basically severed. I don't know anyone who trusts anything that happens now or into the future that the government does, because clearly the government cares nothing about property rights or the rights of landlords. Heck, they couldn't even get the assistance programs correct. Anyone would know that if you had an assistance program for people who can't pay their rent to provide the landlord money to allow them not to be evicted, you sure wouldn't have that managed through the tenant. You would have it managed through the landlord. They set it up such that the tenant could simply feign that they were in the program or going to do the program and didn't fill out the final bit of paperwork, and the landlord never got paid. Clearly, any smart person would have had the landlord go to the government and not the resident. But again, no one really cared, because at the end of the day, the government could absolutely care less about landlords. And that's a bitter lesson we all will hopefully never forget. Number two, we learned that mobile home parks are an essential business, thank heavens. It was kind of odd. They ruled Home Depot to be essential, but Hobby Lobby was unessential. Fairly random, not a lot of thought. Never even saw the official list or who chose the industries that were essential or how those were chosen. But thank heavens, whatever bureaucrat made the list, listed mobile home parks as essential, kind of had to because we're housing. But then again, in today's irrational world, who knows? Maybe housing isn't essential. Maybe streaming videos is actually essential. I'm not sure. We also learned that our residents are also essential, thank heavens, or they're mostly retired. So our people living in mobile home parks, fortunately, are those who do the basic needs and industries that make America work. Whether it's driving trucks or food preparation, whatever it may be, fortunately, our residents fell into two groups. Those who were retired and not working and therefore could care less that you couldn't go to work because they weren't going to work anyway. And then those who were deemed to be in essential industries. So that actually worked out to our benefit. We also learned you don't want to rent mobile homes. Why? Because we all found out rather rapidly that those who owned their own mobile homes, well, they kept paying rent throughout because they knew it wasn't going to be forgiven and they didn't want to lose their home. But people who rented mobile homes, they had no skin in the game at all. They knew at the last moment they'd throw their stuff in the pickup truck and drive off, which is exactly what happened to apartment owners nationwide. Going forward, I think most park owners have learned the bitter lesson and will only want to sell their homes if they're smart and no longer continue on renting mobile homes. Also, we learned that mobile home park demand has never been higher thanks to COVID. COVID made everyone who lives in an apartment think twice about their decision, not liking neighbors knocking on their walls and ceilings, particularly after years of staying at home. And then, of course, they like the idea of a yard. We all learned more about outdoor spaces. I myself even learned more about nature. I would go on lengthy nature walks during COVID. I found I really liked it and still continue to do that. Also, we learned that park residents really like that sense of community. That made them feel good, feel safe. If you needed food and you didn't want to go out because you were afraid of catching COVID, people in parks were the first ones who would volunteer to get you food or basic services with no strings attached just because you were the neighbor and therefore they cared about you and wanted to help you out. We also learned that this new flight from urban cores to suburbs and exurbs is extremely good for the mobile home park industry. We're fortunate enough that mobile home parks, since they're just on one level, have never been a very high and best use of land inside the city's core. Only apartments and things that can go up multiple stories can really afford the price of land. And the mobile home parks that used to be in those urban areas have all been torn down long ago to make way for multi-story buildings. As a result, as the population of America flees cities at this point because they can't forget the horrors of COVID and so many of the arts and cultural events being shut down and all the crazy crime we now have in American cities, as they're all moving farther away out of the city in search of a safer, cleaner, nicer place to live, that's where most of the mobile home parks are. So I hear nothing but accolades, and we see it in our own portfolio of people who want to move out to where the parks are, and that makes our demand higher than it's ever been. Also, we've learned that COVID basically killed off the office and the retail and the lodging sectors, and that's been great for mobile home park owners. You know, it wasn't too long ago, just a decade or two ago, it was almost impossible to get a mobile home park loan. Turn the clock back to the 1990s. What was the most difficult part of buying any mobile home park? Finding a lender because they didn't want to do it. I used to take parks around bank after bank after bank after bank, and all I got was no, and then a maybe. And when I got the maybe, I'd work that lead because the maybe was better than a no. At least I had a shot. Back then, deals fell all apart all the time and collapsed because no one could find banking at all. Why? Because banks hated mobile home parks. They all pointed to that beautiful office building or strip center and said, oh no, we only make loans on stuff like that. That's the good stuff. And they treat us all like lesser citizens. Fast forward to today in a post-COVID world and what has been destroyed. I could drive through any American city and point out any number of large, towering office buildings and hotels that are completely vacant. Been to Chicago recently? Notice that most of the retail is now gone. Some of those buildings are 98% empty in the retail sections. And all you have to do to go to basically any major mall in America, and you're lucky if you can find even 70% occupancy rates. As all those things have fallen into complete ruin economically, it's had a huge impact on the respect the industry gets from lenders. They're now saying, gosh, wait a minute here. I guess being pretty isn't the whole movie. Maybe that really attractive office tower was a bad loan. And maybe that mobile home park, which was not anything great in the looks category, was much, much safer. And that's really been very, very positive for the industry. I think the big thing we all learned from COVID, and we'll hopefully never forget, is we have to be watchful. We have to move fast. We have to trust no one. We have to enter into a new era as a landlord of complete skepticism. Watch people's actions. Watch their motives. I know when the first signs of COVID popped up, I myself became concerned of what happens, because I know that America is completely poorly managed and dysfunctional. I saw a list, all the things you'd want to have if in the event of a pandemic. I ran down to a grocery store and a Walmart, set buying everything up. People thought I was nuts. I was buying shopping carts full of toilet paper and Kleenex before anyone ever thought of that. I bought up entire sections of rubbing alcohol and other items. I looked like a genius when 2 years later you still couldn't get any of it. That's because I've learned to be a skeptic, to not fit in with other people and their opinions. And we all learned from COVID that you've got to move quick. You got to be ahead of the crowd. If you wait and the crowd gets up to you, everything's kind of wiped out. You have to be resourceful. All smart park owners learned during the COVID how to run their businesses from afar, even if it meant we had to show homes, but we couldn't physically see the customer to do it. We all learned methods to get around that. You got to be completely self-reliant. That's the biggest lesson learned probably from the entire pandemic is we can't look at the government to solve our problems. We have to do them ourselves. And we've got to be persistent. We have to be resilient. And if we follow those steps, I think the next time we have a national emergency, whatever it may be, we will all be better prepared. This is Frank Rolfe, the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. Be sure to visit us at mhpmastery.com to subscribe to the show, read our show transcriptions, and access all of our great information on mobile home park investing.